So I'll begin with some questions that came in during your presentation that we weren't able to get to. The first is, as a pastor and as a faculty member, how can we mentor and direct a new generation towards social action and justice?
Thank you, good sir. The first way that we can prepare them is to model, to practice what we preach, and to walk the talk. I don't believe that there's any other way that we can authentically or genuinely expect that new generations of ministerial leadership, whatever capacity they're serving in, are going to be able to hear us or see us unless and except that we demonstrate the very integrity and courage and witness that we are expecting of them. There is no way to get around that. We cannot, I think, ask more of them than we would ask of ourselves. But when they see us, then they know that we are in this struggle together. And it is in the struggle together as community, as the body, if you will, that new generations coming alongside us are able to have not only the courage, but the resources of our experience, our wisdom, our mistakes, our shortcomings, to hear all that we have been through, and then to know that as they walk forward proudly into the new day, that we are going to stand alongside them, encouraging them, challenging them, celebrating with them the possibilities that we could not fully exhaust ourselves.
Well, I'm going to push that a bit. So how would that look? Now, I know for myself, I've gone and spoken in correctional institutions for persons, and these are people that could be my age and share with them and ask questions. How did you get here? And I've also done prayer invocations at the Moral Monday that got started here in North Carolina. So, and then I don't know what would be some other contours of this? Going into the schools to visit them, going to their events, having some fireside chats with them about what they're doing. I don't know. Well, what are some other examples of walking beside? I know as a pastoral counselor, that's what we do in pastoral care, saying walk with persons through those dark valleys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Lattimore, all these examples you gave were just, spot on. I don't feel any need to embellish that,
okay,
except to say amen.
Amen. Okay.
We have often expected others to do, and when I say we, I'm talking about all of us who are in ministry. We have often asked more of others than we have asked of ourselves. And because of what you're talking about, bearing witness in our prisons, in the penal system, but also advocating for those who have been unjustly brought to trial.
Yeah.
I think about, just to give one example, over the last 4.5 years of my time at Candler School of Theology at Emory, it was spent every week, month in, month out, over those 50 plus months at the correctional facility, first in Atlanta, and then in Decatur, Georgia.
Okay.
Where a particular individual whose notoriety ended up being made into a film which I will not name per se, but let me simply say that some of you will remember there was a moment 15 years ago now. I've lost track where uh, this gentleman was in the courtroom, able to extricate himself, collect the gun of one of the sheriffs in the courtroom. I think it may have been the bailiff. Shot the judge, killed the judge, killed two other persons in the courtroom, if memory serves correct. Um, Escaped,
Mm,
killed another person outside of the courtroom during his travels, and then made his way to an apartment complex where he um, was holed up with a young woman whom he did not know, um, held her hostage, and in the course of that experience was eventually captured and um, brought back to trial, where it was determined that he would be um, uh, brought up for the death penalty. And it was in the course of this work with him over these several years, learning about a young man whose life had nothing but tragic turns because of all of the indignities and inequities in our society. This young man not only had done these dastardly deeds and acknowledged them, but also made a turn, Dot- Dr. Lattimore, to Islam as his faith.
mhm.
Why? Because he felt that the Christian community that he had grown up with and that he had known had not um, been able to demonstrate for
Yeah.
him the kind of courageous witness that you and I are talking about today.
Okay.
And so he went down a different path. And we read the Quran together
Mm,
over those several years
mm.
prior to my departure for Howard University School of Divinity.
Wow. Wow. That's quite a testimony. Next question. You spoke of activists coming forth as a result of the killings of Taylor and others. Activism is organized and sustained. While there were numerous protests that lasted for weeks, do you think true activism is now present in this country?
True activism is present. It has always been present. It will always be present. I think, at least for me, the question is more about is activism um, enabled sufficiently that it becomes a movement and not just a moment? And I think there are questions about that right now. Um, March 13th will be the 1 year anniversary of the murder of Breonna Taylor.
Is that right?
Um,
Okay.
yes. And I'm here in Louisville, of course, which means that it is going to be um, a very solemn commemoration.
Mm,
But it will also be, as has always been the experience of Black folk, um, in sacred spaces,
mm.
that we will also celebrate a life, because hers was one well lived,
Yeah.
uh, just extinguished before its time, but so beautifully lived. And so we will remember her, but there are also demonstrations going on at the state capitol, even as we
Yeah.
speak, with respect to public policy issues. And I think it is terribly important that we never become complacent in the face of injustice. We can't afford to relax,
Yeah.
Dr. Lattimore.
Yeah. 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 Black churches are everywhere. What is our collective responsibility as Africans worldwide to maintaining theological exchange for a shared progress without making Africans in Africa feel excluded from being active participants in our own liberation theology?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm not sure if that question is, the vantage point. Is that a question that is coming from uh, African America, or is that a question that is coming from um, diasporic Africa worldwide, or is that a continental African question? Because depending
Well,
on
in our own, I'm thinking, given the last two words, our own liberation theology, which means our own meaning the U.S. Territories.
the
That
U.S.
is
context.
American.
Yeah.
It's American. So I think that's probably as I'm reading it.
Okay.
It's really from the perspective. I won't say vantage point, from the perspective of U.S. Black Americans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if that is the case, then I would begin where I think I shared, one of
Mhm.
the mantras that has been close to me for decades,
Yeah.
going back to my um, initial trips to the continent.
Mhm.
If you have come to join me, then you are wasting your time. But if you have
Mm.
come because your liberation, your freedom is bound up with
Is with
mine,
mine.
then let us work
Okay.
together.
All
That
right.
is, that is always for me the perspective from which to operate. It doesn't matter if we're talking about um, the freedom and liberation of our siblings on the African continent, or whether we're talking about across the diaspora uh, globally, or whether we are talking about here in the United States. What we have certainly learned, and I've had this conversation, especially many times with my beloved, who for many years was a high school counselor,
Okay.
and in her last stint, the vast majority of the students, about 2/3 or so, were um, immigrant populations, including a quite sizable African
Hmm.
population.
Hmm.
And listening to the kind of counseling engagements that were needed to bring those students through the matrix called the United States of America. And then considering how often we in the Black church, quote unquote, in the United States have oftentimes not been as kind to ourselves and to each other as we ought to be, because we have established a litmus test for who will be defined as an insider, as a Black person,
Yeah. Yeah.
is highly problematic. And
Yeah.
so we have seen a proliferation of um, African immigrant congregations, rightly so, because they need a place to feel at home. There are many who have come into African American faith houses and not always felt
No. No.
welcome. So
No.
they've had to struggle with this, in the same way that for those of us who have spent any time on the continent, we know that sometimes we can also be looked askance upon.
Yeah.
We can be viewed as suspicious because we are coming from the North American context. We have to, the crab in the barrel syndrome is not peculiar to Black folk in the
Right.
United States. It's one that we have to be able to get through. Um, but we can't do it if we're not willing to do the hard work of
Yeah.
sitting at the common table together, um, it, taking seriously the liberation struggles of all of our peoples everywhere, whether we're talking about what's going on in Ethiopia right now, or whether we're talking about what's going on in Zimbabwe right now, or any other part of the globe, as well as what is going on within our own backyard here in the
Yeah.
US of A.
Yeah. Okay. All right. For better, for worse, our national moral landscape has been shaped by the dynamics of Christianity that has, from the start, been deeply intertwined with religious mythology and cultural symbolism. The founding fathers did not, for the most part, believe that what evangelical Christians believe now. What do you believe is our common language and meeting ground, our tools of analysis, and yes, our inspiration for repentance, and our hope for redemption?
Oh, that's a long
Uh,
question. Okay. Ooh,
Somebody, yeah.
okay, I hope I
Maybe
can.
I should break it down.
Yes, can we?
Let,
Can we?
let me
Thank
let me
you.
break it down. For better or
Okay.
worse, our national and moral landscape has been shaped by the dynamics of Christianity from the start. And so this has been filled with mythology and cultural symbolism. So talk about that, just
Okay.
that,
Okay.
terms of how we were founded and where we are now. I mean,
Yes.
given what's taken place.
So to make it quite straightforward, we often talk about the United
The
States
Christian
as
nation,
yes,
Christian
we
nation.
talk about that, but it is nowhere embedded in the official documents of the United States. Um, Not a single word that says that anywhere. What is clear is that there was a
Endowed by their creator and all that.
yes, but
Okay.
that's not Christian language.
No, I know. I'm
That's
just saying it is, but I'm just saying how that gets
yes, and
used.
that's
That
the
God
yes.
has ordained this sort of. Anyway, okay,
That's right. But that can be applied to a wide um, variety of faith traditions, and
sure,
I think that was that door was also probably intentionally left open to some degree.
sure.
However, I would offer that um, the emphasis is less on Christianity and more recognition that it is Christendom that has been the dominant religion in the United States.
Mhm.
By that, I mean Christianity as a form of empire, Christianity as
Mm.
as the weaponizing of faith against people who have either not um, traditionally been a part of the faith or against persons who were not considered sufficiently human to be
Mm.
fully embraced within the faith. And many populations, as a result, have um, taken Christendom as they have experienced it, as they have encountered it, as it has been imposed upon them, and have learned to apply the hermeneutic of suspicion that always enables them to ferret out the most liberating aspects of that tradition and integrate them with an even broader understanding of the faith, of what it means to be faithful, than Christendom itself has been able to
Okay.
do. A good example of this is many of us know about Howard Thurman's grandmother and
Mm.
how Howard Thurman's grandmother refused to read any of Paul's writings.
Mhm.
Why? Because she knew how Paul's writings had been misapplied, and his grandmother couldn't read.
Right.
And his grandmother didn't have formal education in the way that we think of it today. But she was more than discerning enough to know that this had been used as a weapon, bludgeoning Black people. And
Yeah.
the only piece that she would have read before her presence was First Corinthians 13.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, let's take the second part of that. The founding fathers did not, for the most part, believe what evangelical believe now. So talk
Yes.
about
Well, evangelicals didn't believe then
they didn't
what they
believe.
believe now. Because
They don't, yeah, what is taking Christ or whatever.
well, the Great Awakenings were were coming into existence themselves, and we're especially talking, of course, about the Great Awakenings of the 18th and 19th century. So they were happening um, at a time and in places that were not really deeply impactful on the constitutional conventions of 1776 and beyond. And I think when we understand that evangelicalism, as we think of it today, um, does not have that kind of a lengthy um, tradition, then we don't have to compare what the founding fathers, quote unquote, were trying to do. They clearly had a for some of them a Unitarian slash Universalist kind of understanding of the world, um, but I do think that in good conscience they wanted to have a broader understanding of what it means to be faithful, to keep the door open so that the very kinds of uh, of denigrating of people's faith that uh, the newcomers to this world from England and beyond were trying to escape, or at least that's what they said, would not happen again. And I think that was a good thing for the
Yeah.
United States.
Okay. And then the final part of that long question, what do you believe is our common language and meeting ground, and our inspiration for repentance, and our hope for redemption? I guess, given all this faith stuff, is there, I'm thinking, of course, Howard Thurman, you being a Howard Thurman scholar comes to mind. I got to be his chauffeur once when he was the first theologian in residence at Duke. I got to drive him around that week. But a search for common ground.
Yes.
What is the common ground? I mean, we could say easy. A simple answer would be Jesus, but we'd have to know. What is the?
That's a good word. That's a good word, my brother. Jesus is a good word.
Jesus. Okay. All right.
Yes. And of course, again, we have to unpack.
Or as Thurman would say, the religion of
That's right.
religion of Jesus. That's not Christian. The religion.
That's right.
No, someone.
And it's the religion about Jesus is the Christendom of which we speak.
Yeah.
The religion about Jesus has created categories of human existence. It has created degradations of meaning. It has created hierarchies of being. And the religion of Jesus, which emanates profoundly from his being, mitigates against those kinds of categorizations of human beings and seeks to affirm the common ground that you just spoke about for us all. I think, because Jesus was, of course, a historical figure 2,000 years ago, there were many things that have happened since then that were not on the face of the earth, quote unquote, at that time, which means we have also plenty of.
Are you saying there were some things that were not new under the sun? I mean, come on, wasn't everything that's going? I know there's some expressions, but all that stuff. I mean, come on. There's nothing new
on the theme.
Nothing new under the sun. I mean, he just didn't. Maybe because it was parochial, he elected not to address them. But they were certainly realities of sociological relevance. I mean, they were there. Those issues were there.
The issues of human divide were there.
Yeah.
The specificities as they play out today. Something as simple as nations of the world that didn't exist 2,000 years ago, gives us reason to be reflective on, I think, the deeper and broader lessons that the Nazarene would want us to understand. And that's why Howard Thurman's grandmother loved her some 1 Corinthians 13.
Sure.
And couldn't do anything with the rest of it.
Right.
Because love is
this. Yeah. That's essential. Okay. Do you agree that the Black church exists primarily to listen to and address the needs of the local Black communities? Do you agree? Do you agree that the Black church exists primarily, and I'm putting emphasis on these words, they don't, maybe that they don't mean them that way, to listen to and to listen to and to address the needs of the local Black communities?
That's
a yes, no. Yeah.
I want to say yes, but in practical terms, that has not always been the case. I think it is supposed to be the case. It ought to be the case. It must be the case that our congregations.
But the reason for being, Black church's reason for being.
Yes.
Huh?
Should be, but it has not always been.
Okay.
I don't think that's a yes or no.
Okay.
Yes, that is its reason for being. No, that has not been its practice.
Okay. All right. Okay. Have federal, state, and local government financial support affected the Black church's voice on political matters? That's another one of those yes,
Yeah,
yes,
I would
no.
say to a modest degree, yes. And I say to a modest degree because most congregations that to my knowledge, have not really engaged uh, government processes, policy processes at that level. I think if there's a captivity, it's been more at the level of culture um,
Okay.
than at the level of politics. Um, and we certainly have had, if I'm reading the question correctly, we certainly have had instances in every location where, as clergy, we have sometimes drunk the Kool-Aid of what was going on in our local
Right.
governments. Um, but uh, I would not apply that to everyone. I wouldn't even
Okay.
apply it to most.
Okay.
Did I read that right? Was I hearing that question correct?
Yeah, I'm reading that again. I'm looking historically at the role of the Black church, which was almost a kind of multi-dimensional place
Right.
of
Yes.
service and gathering and needs meeting, meeting needs.
Yes.
Whereas as the Black church, I don't know if as Blacks became more educated and less dependent on the Black church moving into society, there are other organizations took over some of those functions. I mean, in terms of advocacy, social needs, self-help, welfare, social welfare. I was my undergraduate major, social welfare. So the Black church, although many, I mean, again, can't paint it with a broad brush. Many churches are still. I'm thinking of what the Black church did during the Depression. Father Divine and Daddy. Those churches that fed, soup lines and help people exist. But just even before that, if we go back antebellum or whatever, that the church was an institution, and I say second to the Black family, that is crucial in terms of survival of Black folk, in terms of what the Black church did relative to education, starting schools. I mean, the first post-slavery, emancipation was to say we want to build some schools. We're going to start churches in the basements, and
Right.
the church became a schoolhouse kind of thing. So that's less the case, but no less the need. No less needed.
Yes, no less needed. I may have put too much emphasis on the part about the government here.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm thinking about local churches right here in Louisville, even as we speak,
Yeah.
are the providers of not only groceries to people in Black communities here where there
Yeah.
are food deserts,
Mhm.
but are also providing vaccination sites
Okay. Yeah.
for testing and shots because there are no health clinics available.
Wow.
They have established banks in their churches, and
Credit
some
union.
of these are large. Some of
Credit
these are
union.
large churches, but some are also small. They've taken the widow's mite and they've done a whole lot with it.
Wow.
For me, it's important to continue to laud and to recognize those churches without respect of denomination or tradition, because they are struggling valiantly, and the differentiation of services that has taken place in our communities, it's there, it's important, but I would still say, Dr. Lattimore, that without question, the central institution of the Black community, beyond the Black family, is the Black church.
Yeah, that's what I've contended, that it is still the most significant institution.
Yes.
Even though the other institutions, Urban League and other civil rights organizations have come to fore.
And we need them all.
You know, United Negro College Fund, all those they're still important, but
That's right.
become important.
We need them all.
Well, a couple more. How do we bridge the gap between race and religion in America?
How do we bridge the gap between race and religion in America? I'm not even sure I understand that question. Bridge the gap between race and religion. Huh.
Well, I think we can go back to the example of Dr. King and others that have said that the church, the 11 o'clock hour is the most segregated. I mean, one is you could use the example of segregation although there are still interfaith congregations and interfaith congregations, and we know the work of Howard Thurman and what he did by founding the first interfaith, interfaith, interreligious institution, congregation in America. But when we worship, we still fundamentally worship separately. And I think religion has reinforced the issues of racial, I won't say superiority or racial difference. That's been reinforced in congregations. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's if that makes sense. Okay. As I'm trying to
that's helpful.
Unpack that. I didn't write that question. As I'm trying to to unpack it. Unpack it.
That's very helpful. I quite honestly, I don't invest a whole lot of energy in in trying to do that as much as I invest in
what we have in common
to invite everyone into the authenticity of their being, and in so doing, in worship and in practice, that's where the divides fall. But the idea that there's going to be a dissipation or a dissolution of these houses of worship that are not also going to be racially focused, I don't expend much energy there.
Well, I know what you do expend energy on is whosoever will.
Yes.
They come so that they should be places that are invitational, and so that we are authentic in how we worship, so that whoever wants to come can come. I mean, that's right.
And if you are authentic in your being, that means you have to begin with.
You have to start with yourself as a person of authenticity,
and let all else flow from there. It's not a hard equation, but it does not begin with systems and structures. It begins with you. And if you are authentic to yourself, you then move into the systems.
You move into that. Yeah.
And you work to dismantle any apparatus that prevents people from coming to God within her or himself.
Okay. Well, this final question is, this relates to some of that last question.
Okay.
Why do we have believers not working together? I think the question is not fully accurate. In other words, why are churches competing or seem to be competing rather than as believers? If we all say that we're believers, then why isn't there more collaboration, cooperation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
but I would think it takes courage. It takes courage to do something different. And this will be a little just a little testimony. I'm currently the president-elect of Salisbury Rotary and my term starts in July, and they've never had an African American, a black as president. And I debated whether I would accept the offer to be the president. But I think it's not only what's going on now that makes it timing, but also the fact that they are open to something different. And so I then had to search myself. Do I need to do this? And of course, I got other things to do. But the other thing is, okay, I want to do something to make this community better and be representational in that. Mm-hmm. And so then I have to then make room in my time and energy to do that. So I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think
because otherwise, if I say there is not this working together, then what have I done to contribute to that?
I think you are absolutely on point. I would also offer that a major reason why we have difficulty working together is because for many of us, consciously or not, the God we serve is not the God that we think we're serving sometimes.
Okay, all right.
And so sometimes we're serving the God of nationalism.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes we're serving the God of capitalism. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we are serving the God of sexism and chauvinism. Wow. And on and on and on. And Martin King talked about this substantially. And I think if we are not willing to do the hard work of understanding that to be a follower of Jesus means that the wholeness and well-being of persons in the presence of the living God is our first and foremost accountability, as opposed to the population of our pews or the filling of our coffers, or the number of followers we have on social media, and on and on and on. If those things become our surrogate gods, then it stands to reason why we find it is so difficult for us to.
Because we're competing. We're always competing. We're always competing.
That's right. And my understanding of Jesus is very much about engaging us in community, which is why King talked about beloved community.
Beloved, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that really does take more work than some of us, I shouldn't say some of us, than many of us really want to do. Yeah. It's hard work to be a follower of Jesus because sometimes it will take you to the cross.